Hi everybody. So obviously this channel is made for total drama specified things, and while there will be something coming in the future, I think it was a fun idea to start a little thing on the channel that would be what if scenarios in total drama seasons. This is basically inspired by the channel You. They do a lot of drag race what if theories, and I thought, wow, this is actually a really good idea. And so today I've gone through Revenge of the Island. I've rewatched the entire season, and today we are going to see what if Scott had not been a total cow and messed with everybody in his team, and basically him not rigging for his own team to lose. So, with that being said, we're going to start with the first episode. Everybody shows up. Joe, Mike, Zoe, Anne Maria, Brick, and Cameron are still on the Mutant Maggots. Lightning, Sam, B, Stacy, Scott, Dakota, and Dawn are all on the Toxic Rats. First episode, Scott didn't really do anything. He was actually pretty helpful towards his team. He didn't really try to sabotage anybody. So the episode would have been pretty much the same outcome. The Mutant Maggots win. Lightning, Sam, B, Scott, and Dawn are all safe. Dakota and Stacy are in the bottom two, and Stacy gets voted off. Episode 2 is where we see a little bit of a change. Now, during the original episode, Scott caused a couple problems that actually benefited his team, where during the episode he was trying to fall, and it ended up actually helping him a lot. I believe that if he would have actually been trying, he would have actually done pretty poorly and wouldn't have been able to get through his part as fast as he did. By the time Sam would have gotten the Toxic Rat mascot thing, that he wouldn't have been able, I think he would have only gotten to the end of his once by the time Cameron would have actually finished. So with the fact that Scott would have actually been fucking up, and then you have Sam, who was already doing poorly in that challenge and was already poor in the previous challenge. So I think that once the Mutant Maggots would have won, that Toxic Rats would have actually still lost the challenge, and the only difference here is that Lightning, B, Dawn, and Dakota are safe because Dakota didn't really fuck up the challenge for their team, and I think that it would have been between Scott and Sam, but I think that the team would have seen that Scott was a bit more helpful and Sam would have been not as helpful looking at the previous challenge too, and I think that Sam would have ended up getting voted out with Scott being in the bottom two with him. Episode 3 was the snowball fight challenge, where they had to fight each other in like the snow castles they had built and such. And this episode was actually pretty obvious that the Toxic Rats would have won. They would have won. We all know they would have won if Scott wouldn't have destroyed B's invention. And so with that, the Toxic Rats would have obviously won this episode. It's no surprise. And with the Maggots being up for elimination, I think after the performances in the challenge, I think that Mike, Zoe, and Brick would have all been safe, along with Anne Maria. Probably she would have gotten like some heat, but I don't think she would have gotten any votes. And I think that it would have been between Cameron and Joe. Cameron had already proven that he isn't really the best in challenges. While he did end up winning the challenge in the previous episode for his team, I think that Joe would have still seen him as like a weaker player because, Joe's all about strength and stuff. So I think that because also the fact that Mike, Zoe, Brick, and Cameron were all seemed to be pretty close. At least Mike, Zoe, and Cameron were pretty close, clearly. And Anne Maria was already doing whatever the hell Mike wanted because she was too busy sucking his dick. I think that they all would have voted off Joe for being a little harsh. She would have been helpful towards their team, but I think that Joe would have been voted off here. Episode 4 was the non-elimination challenge, and I'm only bringing this up because of the team swap that would have happened. So what I think would have happened was during the challenge, the Rats actually won this, and it was mainly because of Sam, but Sam's not here. And I think that Dakota would have just been in Sam's spot because Sam didn't get picked up because he was pretty slow and pretty useless towards his team, and Izzy was trying to pick off all like the more better players for their team. And I think that B could have possibly been fine later on considering he's pretty smart with his inventions, but I think that Izzy would have still picked him up. Probably it would have been like Scott, Dakota, and B would have gotten picked up, but still, I think that Brick would have been last for the Maggots, and Scott and Dakota would have been last for the Rats, and I still think that Scott and Dakota would have actually won, because if Scott was actually trying instead of forcing Sam to screw up, they would have clearly won that. And since Brick screwed up for his team, I think Brick still would have tried to get rid of himself, and Brick would switch over to the Toxic Rats. Moving on to episode 5, we have the seagull fight thing where they had to have the boats with the seagulls and the guns. And so the Rats lost this challenge, but this episode, Dawn took a huge leadership role because Lightning was pretty much out of commission, and I think that this would have been Bea and Dawn's like leadership type of thing, because during the original episode also, Dawn tried to really help her team, and I think that they would have won the challenge had not Scott done what he did. And with also Bea being there, I 100% think that their gun would have actually been a lot more impactful towards the other team, so I think that the Maggots would have clearly lost. In this episode, we also see that Zoe and Anne Maria already don't like each other, and Mike and Cameron are already pretty close to Zoe, so I think it's pretty obvious that Anne Maria would get voted off and Zoe would get like 1 vote and be in the bottom 2 with Anne Maria. In episode 6, we have Save Lindsay challenge, basically, where they did the fashion runway and then Lindsay gets kidnapped, and then they have to do the whole barrel thing. Pretty sure they only did this because of Sam, but he's not here, so we're gonna do it anyway. So basically during this challenge, there wasn't really anything that Scott did that could have caused the challenge to go in another direction. I think Scott was actually pretty helpful during this episode. I didn't see anything that could have caused any other issues to occur. And I think that during this episode, when Brick goes to do like the fashion runway thing, I think Dakota would have actually been really helpful here. And I think that Dakota would have actually like kind of came out for a second. She would have really tried to help. Kind of like how Sam almost came out during the second half of the episode. But when Lindsay gets kidnapped and they're trying to lure the guy, I think that Zoe would have taken the approach of being like the beautiful woman, and Dakota would have also probably tried to do that, but she's also, mind you, this entire time trying to be famous, so she's still dealing with her photographer, so she's trying to look pretty. So I think that Dakota would have actually almost finished the challenge for her team, and then she would have ended up getting the photographers, and she wouldn't have been able to finish the challenge, even though I think she would have almost won it. And with Brick already screwing up on the challenge also, I think that the Toxic Rats would have actually lost the challenge. Brick would have gotten a vote or two, but Dakota would have been voted out, basically switching places with Sam. As for the team swap, Chris asked for 2 strong players from each team. I think Zoe and Lightning would have stepped up at this point because Scott wasn't trying to get anything and Joe was gone. So Lightning and Zoe then are going to switch teams because that is what happened in the original. Episode 7 is the challenge where they have to go into the mines and deal with Ezekiel. Now, Anne Maria isn't here, so we don't have that whole Ezekiel and Anne Maria scene and stuff. But what we do have is everybody at least trying to do the challenge. And I think that during this episode, Dawn would have been a little more in the back for her team. She wouldn't have been as helpful because I know that Zoe and Bea and Scott would have all been pretty good on their own during the challenge, and I think that Brick and Dawn would have struggled a tiny bit. Lightning would have pretty much carried Mike and Cameron to the win, honestly, but in the challenge, when you can see that Brick actually sacrifices the win just so then everybody actually escapes, so no matter what team he would have been on, Brick's team would have lost. And I think that in this scenario, because Dawn wasn't really as helpful during it, I think Dawn would have gotten like a vote or two, but Brick would have definitely gotten voted out, and since Anne Maria's not here, nobody is quitting. Episode 8 is supposed to be the episode where Dakota returns, since we already had somebody quit, but Dakota wasn't eliminated in episode 2, so I don't think she would have actually tried to come back for the fame, and she wouldn't have returned, therefore we still have the whole 7-person group. And since she's also not here, she couldn't have been helpful towards her team trying to find Sam and Gwen. And I also think that during this challenge, the Rats would have actually won. So Zoe had the map, and during it, Scott kind of like fucked with it, and he basically tried to fuck them over. So I think that during this, if they would have actually had the map, they would have been fine. And also Bea is there, and Bea would have pretty much just carried his team like usual. So I think that they would have won, and I think that the Maggots would have lost, and obviously Lightning would get voted off, Cameron getting a vote because he is not as helpful as Mike. Moving on to the top 6 episode, we have the merge. This was the auto elimination episode where basically the winner of the challenge got to eliminate whoever they wanted. In the original episode, Scott only won because of the fact that Mike was helping him, and he was also trying to like get Mike eliminated because he knew about his secret and such. In this scenario, I think the only people that would know about Mike's personalities is Cameron and Dawn also, because she's the fucking horror shit. And I think that what would have happened in this episode is that B would have actually won the episode, because B is, like I said before, really smart, and I think he would have done really well in a lot of the challenges over the season had he not gone home so early. So looking at it, I think that B would have actually won this challenge, and I think that Cameron would have been eliminated. Episode 10 was the aircraft challenge, where they had to get the $1 million from Heather. Once again, I think that B would have won this challenge. For obvious reasons. Cameron won his challenge because he's a smart person, and he was able to construct something really smart and actually take out Joe before she could actually get to her end goal. Zoe and Scott were already struggling during this challenge, and I think that Dawn wouldn't have done really well either, and I also think that Mike wouldn't have really fared well either. I think he would have been too distracted with Zoe. Zoe already knew about his personalities too at this point, so I think that they would have probably been more so working together, but I don't think they would have actually done as well. So I think B would have won this challenge, and I think that Dawn would have actually gotten voted off. However, if you remember, there is an immunity idol in the show, and when Dawn was originally eliminated, she showed that she actually found a quote-unquote idol, but because Scott isn't fucking everything up right now, there is the chance that Dawn could have found the idol and actually used it on herself. I really think Dawn would have found that idol had Scott not been looking around for it, because since Scott wasn't trying to screw everybody over, he wasn't gonna look for the idol, and Dawn was already clearly looking for it. So I think that Dawn would have actually ended up finding it, and she would have used it here, and Zoe would have been voted out. Moving on to the top 4 episode is the cooking challenge, and that is with DJ. We saw Scott being the only person that's left right now actually in this challenge, and he did pretty shitty. The other 3 people that were in this challenge were Lightning, Cameron, and Zoe, but they're all gone right now, so I don't really have anything else to go off of other than B is pretty smart, but I don't think he's good with food. Mike is pretty good with his good, kind of, but I think that his personalities would have maybe taken over. And Dawn is already having that nature connection to DJ, so I think that Dawn would have actually fared pretty well in this challenge. Therefore, I think she would have won this challenge, and since B was already clearly a huge threat, I think it's no surprise that Mike, Scott, and Dawn would all decide to vote off B. For the semi-final episode, we had the whole issue where they had to go catch the flower from the giant plant. Originally, Lightning won this challenge and eliminated Zoe, but in this scenario, we have all 3 people who were already gone at this point. So I think that what would have happened is it could have really been anybody's game. I think that Dawn being in touch with nature could have easily picked up the flower pretty quickly. Scott being pretty decent at challenges, I think he would have had a fair shot at winning this. And Svetlana being with Mike, I think that Mike could have also possibly won it. So what we're going to do is we're going to look over all 3 scenarios, because I think it's entirely possible that any of them could have happened. In the first scenario, we see Dawn wins the challenge, and I think that Dawn would have taken Scott to the final 2. Mike having his multiple personalities, I think Dawn would have seen that as a huge threat, and Dawn's also a pretty smart person. She's not going to pretend like, Mike isn't gonna have an advantage having, Vito, Svetlana, and all those people. So I think that she would have eliminated Mike in this scenario, and I actually think that Scott would have actually beat Dawn in the final. I mean, when you look at it, they had to construct something and they had to fight each other. I don't think Dawn is strong enough to actually defeat Scott, and I think it would have been a pretty good fight. In the second scenario, we see Scott winning the challenge, and I think Scott would have eliminated Dawn. Now, clearly she is in tune with a lot of things in the island, so she can pose a threat at the final. With Mike and his personalities, I think this would open a door for Mike to win the season then. So I think that if Scott would have won the challenge, I think that he would have taken Mike to the final, but I think that Mike would have actually beat Scott in that final too. Now in our final scenario, Mike wins the challenge and eliminates Scott. Now the reason why I say we're having Mike win the challenge and he eliminates Scott is because Dawn had been pretty kind to Mike already during the season, and even though Scott wasn't trying to rig for his team to lose or anything, and he was actually trying, I think he still would have had that douchey attitude, you could say, and I think that attitude towards Mike could have easily turned him off, and he could have taken Dawn because Dawn was a lot more friendlier to him, and she was a lot more nicer to him. So in the situation where Mike and Dawn are the final 2, I think that Dawn could have beat Mike. And the reason I say this is because during the challenge, the plant thing came out, and I think that Dawn would have been able to easily defeat it and deal with Mike at the same time. I think Mike would have been spiraling also because of Zoe, and you have the whole thing going on, and a lot of other things. And the reason why I don't say this for Scott is because I think that with Scott and Mike, it would have been a pretty quick and fair fight. But with Dawn and Mike, it's pretty like Dawn knows what the hell's going on. Mike's got his personalities, and probably Zoe's already in trouble, so he's worried about that. So I think that would have been a huge situation for Mike. So I think in that scenario, I think Dawn would have won. Obviously, the show's a cartoon, so none of this could have happened. It's all scripted. It's all decided by the producers and the animators and all that jazz. But I think this is a fun video to make because when you're thinking about it in like a realistic situation, I think this could have easily happened. And I really think that Scott and Dawn could have really been in the final two if they would have just had Scott been a nice person. Or not a nice person, but not try to screw over his team 24/7. So if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe because, we're going to do this a lot more. And please comment below what your opinion on this is. I know probably some people are going to definitely disagree with me, and that's completely okay. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. I just did this to have fun with it, and this was just kind of an idea I had, and I wanted to express it. So I hope all of you have a lovely day, and goodbye.